So this is my 2019 NHL Stanley Cup playoff prediction bracket. As you can see, there's a bunch of red on it, which means a bunch of L's. And this is the best my bracket can do. I only was able to get two winners in the first round, then I had them losing in the next round. So my bracket can't get any better. Luckily, NHL.com has a second chance bracket, and I'm planning to take full advantage of it. I'm hoping to put this bad original bracket behind me, moving on to the second chance bracket. So I'm ready to get started. I'm ready to put this bad luck behind me, although I'm not really a luck type of person. But sometimes when it comes to sports, well, at least predicting them, it's somewhat luck because you have to predict so many in a row to get on a hot streak. Right now I'm on a cold streak. Let's hope I can get to a hot streak with the rest of these Stanley Cup playoffs. So the best thing about this is each round is a whole new round. So we're starting the second round of the NHL playoffs tonight. And I'm going to start off with the Eastern Conference side of the bracket because the Blue Jackets and the Boston Bruins, they're going to start their game one by the time as when we're recording this, maybe a little bit over an hour away. So I'm going to talk about that one first. So the Blue Jackets, they have momentum. They swept the Tampa Bay Lightning, who was the President's Trophy champions, one of, if not the best regular seasons in NHL history, and they can't win a playoff game. But Sergei Bobrovsky, the goaltender for the Columbus Blue Jackets, a huge reason why the Blue Jackets are where they at right now. After that first period in Game 1, it seemed like this was going to be a runaway series for the Lightning. But then the Blue Jackets, they clawed their way back in and came back to win Game 1. And after that first period, Sergei Bobrovsky has nearly been unstoppable. He has been unfazed. He became unglued a little bit in that Game 4, but he came up at the right time, making stops when he had to. And that's why the Blue Jackets are here where they are. And the Boston Bruins, they once again beat the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, and they send them home early. So I think this is going to be a great matchup. I think it's going to be a great series. But in the end, though, I think Boston in 6. And I know the Blue Jackets, they have more momentum and more confidence than the Bruins do. But the Bruins have the one thing that the Blue Jackets do not, and that is experience at the later portions of a Stanley Cup playoff. Because the Bruins, they went to the Stanley Cup final not too long ago. At least about 4 years ago. But still, that experience is going to be the difference for me in this series. I think the Bruins win it in 6. Next, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, the New York Islanders. One of the only two things I got correct was the Hurricanes upsetting the Capitals in the first round. And I will take that. If there was only one thing that I got right, I would have hoped that it was that. That way, because it was something that nobody was really going to predict. But the Hurricanes got it done. Justin Williams once again clutch in a Game 7. And the Islanders better hope that it doesn't go to a Game 7. Well, unfortunately, I think this does go 7 games. I think Carolina wins it again. I think Carolina, they have confidence. Islanders, although Barry Trotz seems to have the Penguins' number, as I believe Barry Trotz has won 8 straight playoff games against the Penguins. Because last year, the Penguins, I believe, had a 2-0 lead in the series. And then the Capitals won 4 in a row. And now Barry Trotz, he stepped down as the Capitals head coach. And then he took the Islanders job a few weeks later. And then he sweeps the Penguins. That's 8 consecutive playoff wins against Pittsburgh in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Remarkable. But I think this is going to be a 7-game series again. And I think the Hurricanes, they're going to get it done in 7 because they have confidence knowing they beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. And I think they could get it again. I think they will. I'm going to pick Carolina to win in 7 games. So on to the Western Conference side of the bracket. Now we've got the Colorado Avalanche and the San Jose Sharks. I'm stunned that the Sharks are even in this position because it seemed like Game 7 was getting away from them, but they just made a miraculous comeback. Although some would say that it's the officials that caused that to happen. But either way, you just got to accept the Sharks are here in this position. The Avalanche, I'm surprised that they're in this position. I thought that the Avalanche weren't going to be here. I thought the Flames were going to run with the series. But I think the Sharks, I think they have some momentum because this reminds me of a few years ago. In fact, 4 or 5 years ago, the same year the Bruins last made the Stanley Cup final. They were down 3 goals in the third period, and they came back to win in overtime. And that's exactly how the Sharks got in this position. They were down by 3 goals in the third period, and they came all the way back. Then they eventually made the Stanley Cup final. I'm picking the Sharks here for that exact reason, because they have momentum and confidence. Because nobody thought they were going to be there. Especially when they were down 3 goals late in the third period. I think the Sharks, they're going to make the conference final. I think this series goes into, I think it's going to go 5. I think the Sharks are going to win Game 5 in the tank. I think the Avalanche's luck is kind of running out. I'm going to take the Sharks in 5. That's probably the quote-unquote biggest upset so far, because the Avalanche, they upset the Flames in 5 games. But I just think the Sharks are a much different animal. The Sharks have more they have more guys that are playoff experienced than the Flames had, and there's more playoff experience in the Sharks than there is on the Avalanche. So far the theme is experience and momentum. So they're the final second round matchup. I have the Dallas Stars and St. Louis Blues to predict, and I think this is going to be a great series as well. I'm hoping all 4 of those for the second round series, they go to at least 6 or 7. But I think, like I just said, the Avalanche and Sharks will go to 5. I knew I was going to regret picking the Stars, or not picking the Stars in the first round. I really wanted to. I know that I should have, and I regret not doing it. Just like I knew, I even said it, I was going to regret picking the Stars. Well, I just kind of got to make up for it. I'm only making this pick because as soon as the Penguins got eliminated, I just said that I was going to root for the Blues. So I'm picking St. Louis just for that reason. Nothing against the Stars. It's just that I at least got to have a team that I can at least respect and root for. And I think that's going to be the Blues for me this year, because I think the Blues, they deserve to at least make a Stanley Cup final. So I'm going to pick the Blues to advance in, I'm going to say 7. I think it's going to go all 7. So we're now on to the conference finals. I'm between the Boston Bruins and Carolina Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final. And I don't think there's much really to talk about. I think the Bruins, they have a lot more experience at this point than the Hurricanes do. And I think the Bruins will just sweep Carolina, run them right out of the building. Well, out of their building in Game 4. So I'm going to pick Boston to move on to the Stanley Cup Final. And their opponent between the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues. I think this is going to be a very intense series. I think it's going to go to 6 games, although it could go 7. But I'm going to pick the St. Louis Blues to move on to the Stanley Cup Final. I think it's going to be a complete bloodbath in that series. I think at least 2 of those games are going to go into overtime in that series. And I think the Blues, they'll get both those overtime wins. Because especially if we see an overtime game in that series, if it's in Game 1 and you see like an overtime game, when you lose an overtime game in the Stanley Cup playoffs, it feels like losing 2 games. And it's how you respond to losing an overtime game. It's based off of how you perform and how it defies you. I think the Blues, Game 1 or Game 2 in that series, well, the potential series goes into overtime. I think the Blues, they win that one. And it's going to feel like 2 wins. And I think St. Louis is going to ride that momentum all the way to a Stanley Cup final bid. I think they're going to get it done in Game 6. And now we have the Stanley Cup final. between the St. Louis Blues and the Boston Bruins. And winning the Stanley Cup final in 5 games is the Boston Bruins. And last time I went with the predominant favorite and they got swept. Well, right now the Bruins, with the Lightning eliminated, the Penguins eliminated, the Capitals eliminated, the Bruins, they seem to have a relatively easier path to the Stanley Cup final as they did before. And they could have a relatively easier path to win the Stanley Cup now than they did before. With the Predators eliminated, with the Golden Knights eliminated, and with the Sharks not being in the final, if they don't get there. I feel like the Bruins would beat anybody in the Stanley Cup final except for the Sharks. I think if the Sharks get to the Stanley Cup final, I think they would have a good shot of beating the Bruins. I think the Bruins, they are now the favorite. In fact, they should be the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, and I know I don't like picking favorites, but this favorite's a team that I don't like, and might as well pick a team I don't like in a second chance bracket, because if they win, who cares? If they lose, who cares? I don't like them anyway. So that's just my mentality. Although I really do think the Bruins, they have the best chance to win the Stanley Cup final. Well, they have the best chance for the Stanley Cup out of all the 8 teams remaining. So that is my second chance bracket for the NHL Playoffs 2019. Like, share, and subscribe. And tune in a few hours. I'm planning on going live for the first round of tonight's NFL Draft. So be sure to tune in, turn on the notification bell. Hopefully I'll see you in a few hours for the first round of the 2019 NFL Draft.